Okay, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, if you are unaware, are my favorite football team. So I'm always interested in what this team is up to. But just in general, I do think they're in a fascinating situation. So let's talk about where they're at right now, how they can improve, and what they can do to get better, and also what they have to make sure they do to avoid getting worse. As, they have made the playoffs 5 straight years. They've won the division 4 straight years. Admittedly, the NFC South, I would say for 3 of those years, has been very weak. We're in only, I'm just trying to think here. I believe in none of those years has a team other than the Buccaneers finished above 500 the past 3 years. Of course, the Saints 5 years ago were very good, won the division despite the Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl. But yeah, what can the Buccaneers do from, I think the question is, they've been a quality playoff team these past couple of years. They won a playoff game 2 years ago. They played very competitive against the Commanders just this past playoffs in this season. What can they do to be more than that? Well, you look at their cap situation. It's not amazing in 2025, although it is pretty good in 2026. Actually, now in 2026, Mike Evans will be a free agent again. Luke Gedeke will be a free agent again. So there's some guys that they have to make sure they keep, but they're in a pretty good spot in 2 years. This year is kind of the one you have to work with, and Jason Licht isn't afraid to kick the can down the road. That's in part how they won a Super Bowl and almost won another with the following year. Played the Rams to the buzzer in that kind of crazy divisional game that I was at. That was sad for me. But anyway, Light's not afraid to kick the can down the road. Has the ability to do that. The $2 million seems low, but you can work around that if you want to. The free agent list Tampa Bay has is really fascinating. So the number next to these guys' names is how many millions of dollars they're projected to get in free agency. Chris Godwin being kind of the really interesting one. So obviously, he was having this amazing season. Liam Combs really enjoyed using him, knew how to call plays to get him open and things like that. Has this great year where you're thinking, man, this guy's going to get a ton of money in free agency. Obviously gets hurt at the end of that Ravens game in kind of a meaningless spot. Because of that, misses the year. Teams are going to be less likely to throw a bag of money at him. Now, again, we talked about Tampa Bay. Not exactly having a ton of money to throw around, but you could also just backload a contract for Chris Godwin and make it work because you are okay in future years. That's something to note. Lavonte David kind of has consistently just been signing these one-year deals with Tampa Bay. Seems like he wants to play there, and I don't think he would go anywhere else. The question is just, does he want to play again, and can you make the money work? Ben Bredeson, who he's an interesting player that I wouldn't actually hate if Tampa Bay decided to move on from because, so Tampa Bay's offensive line, they were really good in 4 spots. So you have the incredible guard tandem of Luke Gedeke and Tristan Wirfs, one of the best one of the best tackle tandems in the league, and they're both still so young. You also drafted a center last year who was very good, and Cody Mock, the right guard, wasn't great as a rookie, but was really good as a second-year player. Ben Bredeson, the left guard, was the one guy who struggled. I wonder if you try and replace that and try to get a really good offensive line, potentially. Why not? Why not be great in an area if you can? A few of the other players, though, are players that most people might not even know the names of. Anthony Nelson, Greg Gaines, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and William Goldston. But they're all, I would say, valuable rotational defensive linemen. Letting them all walk means you do have to replace them. So there has been the Myles Garrett suggestion, and that would in some ways work, of you kind of replacing all their snaps by just getting an every down player there. Wouldn't replace all of it because a couple of those guys are interior, but you get the idea. Again, though, can they make the money work, and is it worth giving up a draft pick as well? That's the question. It's a gamble. A couple guys they could get rid of for money as well. Jamel Dean, getting rid of him would save $11 million. Jordan Whitehead, getting rid of him would save $5 million. The issue, of course, is Tampa Bay was so injured last year, especially defensively. Is it worth it to get rid of a couple of secondary players when the secondary was already so injured? What they could do, though, is kind of what they did last offseason when they traded Carlton Davis and then used a third-round pick on Tyke Smith. You could consider trading away Jamel Dean, getting a draft pick back, using that on another defender. You get $11 million. Maybe that could help you with a Myles Garrett move, or maybe it just helps you re-sign Chris Godwin, and then you can still use that draft pick to try and add another secondary player. You're getting the depth there, and Dean and Whitehead, really, both players who I really like when they're healthy, but the health thing is an issue, especially with Dean, who just seemingly can't stop from getting injured. In both playoff games these past 2 years, a key reason why they lost was because he got injured in those playoff games. At a certain point, it doesn't matter how good you are when you're healthy if you're not healthy when you need to be. So that's just a concern. So that's kind of where they're at right now. Also worth mentioning, they only have 6 draft picks as of right now. Their 6th round pick they do not have, so they still have the other ones, but a little bit under what you would want in draft capital as well. And since they keep making the playoffs, they keep having to draft sort of in the back half of the first round, so it's hard to get superstars there. And they missed on a couple of their first round picks, although they've been great at drafting depth later on in the draft. At the end of the day, for Tampa Bay, I like their offense, and I don't think they need to improve that too much. Could you consider even letting Chris Godwin walk simply because, hey, look at what we did last year without Chris Godwin. The offense was still very good without him, especially when Mike Evans came back. Do you try and just maybe draft a guy in the first round and let Chris Godwin walk or something like that? That's an option. Although, for me personally, I'm still a believer in offense wins championships, even with the Eagles' defense being a huge part of why they won a Super Bowl. Their offense was also very good. Had an MVP candidate that they barely even used in the Super Bowl and still had a great offensive performance in the Super Bowl. So, obviously, you usually need to be good a lot of places. And I think that would be the argument. If Chris Godwin is getting up there in age, is coming off of an injury, obviously as a fan, I don't want to see Chris Godwin leave. I could see the logic, though, of saying, you know what, let's use that money on defense. I don't think the Myles Garrett thing is insane. I still am leaning towards, if I was the GM of the Bucs, I wouldn't make that move, but I do think there is a logic to it. Again, part of the Myles Garrett thing is it seems as though he's going to want a new contract as well, so you paying him like $30 million a year to get him, as well as giving up a ton of draft capital, which that feels concerning. Personally, what I think happens is I think they find a way to keep Godwin and Levante David. I think some of these other players end up going and they try to draft their replacements. They once again probably are going to draft a defensive lineman relatively early on and hope that they can get some talent there. They got to start hitting on some of these D-line picks. That's just kind of what it comes down to. Maybe add some more depth in the secondary as well. You don't want to go into the season without a number 3 corner, because when you do that, a corner's going to get hurt at some point, and then you're going to have some issues. So I think that drafting depth is the most important thing right now, bringing back the key names, and we'll see what they do. They could have a very explosive offseason. That is on the table. They also could have a very tame offseason, and I think the tame is the one that's probably going to end up happening, but I do find them to be in a very, very fascinating situation. What I want to have happen, I want them to keep everybody and then trade for Myles Garrett for only a 7th round pick, and he decides, you know what, I'll play for nothing because I like it here. But that's probably not going to happen, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.